Hello, everyone. So, today, what we're going to get into is talking about the final impacts of the Industrial Revolution. We're going to talk about changes in the workplace, and I'm going to kind of give an overall assessment of everything. Let's just jump right into it. Okay, so you are also at this time going to get the development of trade unions, like, for instance, the United Ironworkers Assistance Society of Victoria. Pretty cool. That one's actually in Australia, which, of course, is controlled by Britain. So, there you go. So, the whole idea of a trade union, okay, this is a labor organization that bands together workers to fight for better wages, working conditions, stuff like that. Early on, they are not really liked by the federal governments in most places. Like, for instance, Britain passes laws called the Combination Acts in 1799 and 1800 to actually outlaw them, although they'll form anyway, and the government will eventually back down on that, but they're still not going to like them, and we'll get into it. In general, they had a couple different goals. One was to actually preserve employment by limiting entry to their trade. They actually wanted to regulate factories on not being able to hire too many people because they wanted to kind of set themselves apart, and in this, it actually gave them some power. So that's one idea. And then the other idea is just to gain benefits for them. Like I said, working on conditions and salaries and stuff like that. And they start to form. And what these workers are trying to realize and what they're going to realize is that if they do work together as a unit, there are things that they can do to actually have, success and bring about positive change. Now, the government, as I said, really doesn't like unions. This is actually from the 1980s when the government came to break up a massive strike in England, and they don't like them. As I said, they passed laws to prevent them. Sometimes methods that they would be used would be met by violence, because the fact of the matter is very simply put, it was pro-business all the time, letting them do what they want, and the plight of the workers, for the most part, was generally ignored for a while. But what workers did realize is that it was all about the money, and the biggest impact that they could have was to prevent the production of goods, which can prevent the making of money. Hence, the strike was born, okay? And this is actually a picture of some British strikers, of tailors, I believe, during the 1800s. And the very first strike ever was miners in Northumberland and Durham in England in 1810. Then weavers in Glasgow in Scotland, they struck, if you will, in 1813. And cotton spinners in Manchester, England, struck in 1818. The whole idea is that we are going to shut things down unless you actually are willing to help us or change wages or conditions or eventually get some type of benefits. And to give you an idea, eventually these strikes were so powerful that in 1824 the Combination Acts, which I'd already mentioned in 1799 and in 1800, of course, they were initially formed to outlaw unions. They were repealed in 1824 in hopes of trying to work together with unions a little bit more. Okay, so that's going to be a big deal. And most unions are relatively small. They tend to focus on a particular industry within a city. But what started happening is some people had some ideas of expanding those ideas. And one such one was a man by the name of Robert Owen. And Robert Owen wanted to create a union of multiple jobs across the nation, and he called it the Grand National Consolidated Trades Union. And the idea, again, was to get a huge union of multiple types of workers together, which would give them much more power. That's a picture of Owen on the right. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't last very long because some of the unions didn't actually like each other, and they weren't quite ready for that. It was almost too much at one time. But eventually, you'll get national unions for like one trade. Like one example, and that's their symbol on the right, is the Amalgamated Society of Engineers, which was created in 1850. And they were so successful that they got the beginning of unemployment benefits for engineers across England. Now, this is crucial, and what you actually see a lot of places like the United States, you have national teachers unions, you have trucker unions, there's a lot of different national level unions that have had success in bringing workers together and actually, making some positive change. That doesn't mean that everybody is pro-union and pro-industrialization, however. Another group that was fighting this were called the Luddites. This were skilled craftspeople in northern England that felt that this modernization in the workplace was actually more harmful than good, and it was devastating to their way of life. And many of them found it very difficult to actually make a living anymore, and were losing homes, and it was pretty awful. And so in 1812, they actually start trying to destroy industrial machines because they were kind of the symbol and they were what was used. You see a picture on the left side there. And they were really, really aggressive, okay? Some of them were actually shot. Eventually, the military came in and just absolutely suppressed them. But they become this symbol of like anti-technology and anti, I guess you could say, societal advancement. That's a picture on the right, very propaganda piece. You know, the Luddites are going to rip everybody down and they're going to burn cities because they're anti-progress. And the Luddites actually weren't about that, but that's what has come. You know, if someone calls you a Luddite, not that they would, but the idea is that they're saying that you're anti-technology and change. Like that would be the people that still own a flip phone or don't own a cell phone, which is okay by me. I think I'd like to get rid of mine one day, but that's a different discussion for a different day. But there was still resistance out there, and the Luddites were kind of the first example of that. And I'm going to talk about that more as we move on. Now, then there's a movement called Chartism, okay? And this is, again, started by workers. I don't know if it's a real word, but whatever. This was created by something called the London Working Man's Association, and they drew up a charter, okay, that was a petition for rights of workers, because what they had realized is that working men were the base of society. They were making all of the things that the society needed to run and to make its money. And there's a flyer on the right of like a real one. And so their basic idea was for people to get universal male suffrage. Okay, crucial. Second was payment for members of parliament. See, up to this point, parliament was actually not paid. So really, the only guys, even though it was an elected body, even though not everybody could use their ability to vote, they were pretty much all still rich guys because they had the time and the money. So if you make parliament a paid position, that people would be in parliament, and get rid of property rights requirements for members of parliament. In other words, at this time, parliament members also had to be landowners, and so let's get rid of that. And that parliament needed to meet a specific amount of times per year or annually. And that wasn't really in anything up to that point. Now, interestingly enough, women get involved here, but they're not fighting for themselves. They're mainly fighting for their husbands, which would, for many of them, give them better opportunities. But this is going to be the basis, because many women who are involved in the Chartism movements and stuff like that actually start to learn a lot about the political process and stuff like this, working for the Chartists, if you will. They were very big on peaceful protest. There were some, I guess you could call, minor riots and stuff like that, but the whole idea was to do this through either strikes or protests and marches and rallies, and this is one of the first examples of that we start to get, which the 20th century will be very, very popular with. Now, I'm not going to lie, this doesn't achieve a lot of things, but it is the first step toward getting people organized to fight for rights, and we're going to see this happen in the later part of the 1800s, really from the 1840s on, with liberalism and stuff like that. But in the end, the government will start to change some things, okay? You get the Factory Acts of 1802 and 1819, which will limit hours for children from the ages of 9 to 16 to only 12 hours per day. Understand, this is a big deal, that they could actually work for 16 or 18 hours. And actually, kids under 9 cannot be employed at all. All right. And they must get some type of reading and arithmetic. In other words, you must actually educate them. Now, this is a first step, because the Factory Acts of 1802 and 1819 only apply to the cotton industry, but it's a start, right? With more protests, with more clamor for things, the Factory Acts of 1833 were passed. This is now all textile factories. Mines were still exempt. It's going to take a while there. But children from 9 to 13 can only work 8 hours per day. 13 to 18 can go to 12, but no more. Factories, they actually create a division that inspects factories, and if they are violating this rule, they are fined heavily. And children each day must get 2 hours of elementary education. And so that was huge, and you're actually going to see some people like learn how to read and write from this and can overall improve their station in life. Along with that, you had the Coal Mine Act of 1842. No children under 10 or women could be employed. I told you some of the negatives for women not, getting regulated before, but no more kids in coal mines, or at least sorry, no more kids under 10 in coal mines. So we're getting there. And then in 1847, you get the 10 Hours Act, which children from the ages of 13 to 18 and all women can only work for 10 hours per day. So you do get some positive changes that come from this. Again, this is mainly focusing in Britain because this is the earlier part of the era. So here's the question. The whole idea is, did the overall standard of living really increase in Europe due to the Industrial Revolution? Okay. On the one hand is the positive. Yes, higher income per capita and per family. It's the basis of all the tech we have, basis of all the choices and lower prices that we have. It would provide some social mobility for people as well as increased employment. On the negative side, you get horrible living conditions, which we talked about, horrible working conditions, which we talked about, uneven wages. There would be an increased gap between the rich and the poor. And in Europe, 1% of the population would control 35% of the wealth. And that's actually a bad thing. And really, it's the early folks were the ones that had to bear the brunt of this. Things will get better as we move on, but the world has not changed. And the first step was when man started to like plant food in the ground and stay in one spot. And then this is kind of one of our next big moves as well. And your modern day world goes back to this time. So if you don't like tech and all that stuff, you can blame the British and the Industrial Revolution. So, but we don't need to blame people because, you need to be bigger than that. All right, guys. So we will talk about this more in class, and I'll see everybody soon.